Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, Shaykhna.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for joining me for a third session of the Back to Basics podcasts.
No problem.
In this session, I wanted to relate it back to our previous discussion about the modern privileges we have compared to those of the previous generations.
Yeah.
Given that we have more access to information, knowledge, the ability to study from home, for example, from your mobile phone, from your computer. But that's given me time to think about the challenges that we have obviously with the responsibility of having access to information.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean that we would have we won't always access the right information, if that makes sense? We might be able to access ideas and theories which our religion, in a sense, condemns or tries to prevent us or advise us not to delve deep into. What would be your thoughts on?
Yeah, I genuinely think that's not merely a result of things that we would necessarily peruse for ourselves. Dare I say that I think this is just a result of the modern day world in general. And so there's many things that made it into my own realm of ideas as a kid, which is quite an interesting way in which that happened. And I think this very much goes back to what Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says in Najm al-Balagh, where he states that people resemble their rulers more than they resemble their own parents. What we mean by that is that society, of course, has this influence upon people. And, of course, society is a reflection of how it's ruled, so the way that society is influences people more than their parents do. And I definitely think that's the case. So there definitely is a degree of us being influenced by external factors. It's definitely something more dangerous as a result of freedom of information. And it's difficult to strike that balance. Of course, someone who's discerning and someone who is searching for truth would be able to distinguish between that which is accurate and that which is false. But then you've got those who just accept everything they're fed, and unfortunately they would just buy literally everything that they're sold. And then you've got those things which are in between, where there's a few difficulties as well.
Right. But given our belief that our religion is a holistic religion, a religion that will apply to any place, any time, any era, would you agree or not in the notion that the religion, the religion of Islam is a liberal religion? It allows for freedom of thought, to go and access different forms of information and to diversify our aqidah or our belief system?
It's a liberal religion by some standards. So it's not a religion which is afraid of other ideas. It's not a religion which is afraid of standing up to other ideas. It's certainly conservative from the vantage point of modern British society, modern Western society, in terms of some of its values. I know that some people might be baffled because Muslims tend to unite with the Liberal Parties quite a lot in government, but if anything, our values do align more with conservatives, with the exception of a few things which would be prevalent amongst conservatives, like xenophobia or other racist and intolerant traits. But no, Islam's not really a liberal aqidah in that sense, in the sense that it allows you to literally be as open-minded as possible when it comes to certain ideas. We do believe that there are truth claims, that certain things are black and white, and we definitely think that certain things are wrong, and no matter how many people vote for them to be right, we'll still consider them wrong.
So Islam takes the notion that we know what's best for you.
Yes.
Although you might think otherwise.
Yes.
We'll still tell you no, you're wrong, and
yes.
Follow this way of thinking, otherwise you're doomed to hellfire.
I wouldn't necessarily frame it in that sense. So it's from the vantage point of liberalism, it all sounds quite grim, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But if we can frame it like this, Allah Azza wa Jal demands from us what we call taslim, which is submission. As long as something can be demonstrated to have emanated from Allah Azza wa Jal, and if it doesn't cause us any harm, and if it doesn't cause harm to others, then why wouldn't we follow what is being said if we could demonstrate that it came from Allah Azza wa Jal? So,
Right.
Muslims can genuinely agree that I really think that you've got to play a real mind game in order to disagree as a Muslim that alcohol is forbidden by the religion or that pork is forbidden by the religion. Now, if you're really on having like a bacon sandwich or a glass of beer, now you're doing that to your own detriment. And you kind of got to wonder how good of a Muslim you are if you're just willingly going against that. Now, that's quite different from a Muslim that's trying his hardest and will lapse. So, for example, he forgets to pray on time. Or, for example, he does ghibah because he doesn't even realize it. It's quite different from doing something as a lapse in the person and doing something with a desire to do it after knowing that it's been forbidden.
You explained that very well, Sheikhna. Thank you so much for the clarification. But it's still what still stems in the back of my mind. Say I was born into a Christian family or a Jewish or even an atheist family, and Islam encourages me to, or encourages people who are born into those families to question their faith and to try and seek the truth. But then I could have someone from my own community or from my own family, my brother, for example, will come to me and say, well, I was born into this Shia Muslim family. Why can't I question my faith? Why can't I go searching for another belief system? Does Islam encourage that? Does it put people off from doing that?
I don't think any religion's going to tell you that, well, I encourage you to just start from a position of doubt and doubt everything. Because often we find that this methodology of going into perpetual skepticism very rarely leads to a fruitful ending. But what I do think that it would encourage you to do is question where you are uncertain. So let's look at those two positions again just to clarify the difference.
Yeah.
There's starting from a position of uncertainty on everything. And then there's, well, I agree with this, I do agree with this, I do agree with this, and I agree with these major aspects of religion. But on this aspect which hasn't been explained to me, well, I'm going to question it. I think that Islam would encourage the latter, but it certainly wouldn't encourage the position of ultimate radical skepticism that you're starting from at the beginning. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes complete sense.
And so as for saying that we encourage others to look into questioning their religions, well, I think Islam does encourage people to gain certainty in their own religion too. And what we're looking for is certainty. As for the way that we often portray Islam, that if you're an ex-Muslim, you're going to get killed in a Sharia-abiding society, then that's not the Islam of Ali Muhammad. Yes, there are some rules that come from jurists, but when you look at how the Imams dealt with things, particularly these are dealt with quite a few contemporary jurists as well, they would have dealt with atheists at their time, particularly in the time of Imam Sadiq. There was a movement known as the Zanadiqa, which basically meant atheists who were questioning every single facet of religion. Now, not once did Imam Sadiq get very cheap and say, well, this guy should just get killed, which is the way that some Muslims would have you understand Islam today, unfortunately.
Right. But the way the Imams dealt with the people who kind of criticized the religion, based on my knowledge, is they were very firm and very stubborn with their belief system. Is that correct?
What do you mean?
As in, there was no compromise in their response. There was no.
The Imam is a hujjah of God upon the earth, so we believe that it's his duty to respond in a way which is convincing for the other person, or convincing for those listening who might be affected by the doubts of that person. But they were never firm in the sense that, all right, I've just responded to his shub now take off his head. If you know what I mean.
No, of course not. No.
We're going to now have this person killed. Yeah.
That wouldn't benefit anyone. But I mean, in terms of, there was never any compromise in terms of the belief systems or or
Well,
the word of God, for
no,
example.
never compromise.
Yeah.
But what they would do is they would answer people according to their own basis. And what I found is that they always had the best of akhlaq. Now, this is an area that we are really lacking in,
Yeah.
particularly myself. Like, but it's not just a Shia. I mean, I recently saw a debate where there was a Christian and a Muslim debating, and the Muslim was saying to the Christian, "Well, I'm going to insult you because you've been insulting Islam for the past 10 years." And you're wondering to yourself, what the hell is going on? Like, where the hell are they getting these principles from? We need to show a level of akhlaq which is in line with what the Ahlul Bayt did. And of course, the way that Ahlul Bayt would deal with such people is, everyone's heard that famous anecdote of where the man comes up to Imam al-Baqir and he wants to insult him. And he says that, like, your mother was a cook. And I suppose the Imam saying that, like, well, why would you lie about her? Like that. The Imam says, well, everyone needs a job. And it might not have even been true, but the Imam is just being polite, and he ends up inviting the guy back to his house for dinner and showing the best of akhlaq. Unfortunately, we today have this tendency of just going nuts and acting like we're the sons of God upon the earth, and that we have a right to not have our religions questioned or scrutinized. Yeah.
But in this, well, I'm sure they had liberalists or whatever, however you like to deem them in that time. But in this day and age, we do have a prominence in liberalism, and even within our own even within our own communities and societies.
That's the problem.
But when you mentioned the Imam giving good akhlaq to someone in their response, for example, if a person from the LGBT community approached me, I can give him the best akhlaq on the face of this earth, but at the same time my response will be a very firm one and say my religion is very stubborn about your belief systems and your actions.
Yeah.
So it's to me, it's not always about the akhlaq, it's also about the response. But how would you deal with these?
No, I would never advocate a degree of pragmatism. So I would never say that we could be accepting of these trends of behavior. With LGBT examples, probably one of the most controversial examples, because really you're viewed as like the old villager that's intolerant if you just point out that you're not tolerant of it. But I do think that it's very important for us to realize that the West cannot impose its paradigms onto us. And what do I mean by that? Number one, this whole question of sexuality is a Western question. In Islam, we don't make a distinction between someone that has an attraction towards men or an attraction towards women. We don't recognize that distinction. We don't recognize these are two different categories. For certain people who are mentioned in the books of jurisprudence who have attraction to both. What we say is we don't judge a person by what they feel in their hearts. We judge a person by what they act upon. And what we say is that anyone who has a sexual relationship outside of marriage is committing a sin. Be that with a man or be that with a woman. Be that with the same gender, be that with the opposite gender. Now, some people come forward and they say, well, don't try and be smart. You know what we're talking about. He's attracted to someone of the same gender. Your religion persecutes him from acting upon his desires. I must admit, maybe I'm just stupid, but I've never understood this argument particularly strongly, because we have to go against our desires all the time. I don't want to put you into a deep hole here, so the community can be quite harsh, so I'll put myself into the hole and just say an example from before I became Muslim to kind of save me from any heat. There's been times when before I became Muslim where there would be a female celebrity, teenage ones, and I'd be attracted to them. I'd be like, oh wow, she's really attractive. And they would say, well, she's actually married. When I find out that she's married and therefore she's not in a position to get married to me, should that make me go, oh no, but I'm being oppressed because I can't carry out my desires, I can't no longer do that which I want to do? No, she's married. Move on. Like, you just don't think about it anymore. I'm sorry to say that it's very much the same situation here. In Islam, we don't recognize the validity of such marriages. We don't believe in killing you. In fact, certain Muslim jurists in the past have recognized that in non-Muslim communities such marriages can occur, particularly the Zoroastrians who Islam recognized could have incest marriages. We don't believe in judging you here in the West. Heck, even in the Muslim world, we don't believe in judging you because we believe in the occultation of the 12th Imam. These laws are, of course, carried out by the Imam, and they're not carried out by fallible human beings. But what we're trying to say is that there needs to be a real dialogue. It can't just be one where we start pointing the finger and saying that you're oppressing me or I'm oppressing you. To hold ideas isn't oppressive. And what is oppressive is when you impose your ideas onto other people using force. And sometimes we find that liberalism, in critiquing Islam, in critiquing other ideologies, becomes the very thing it's critiquing. And what we're witnessing today is a level of strongman liberalism, where they're basically imposing onto different religious groups that they have to accept this new relative morality which the West only embraced within the past 15 years. And it's not something we're willing to accept.
So in your theory, you can be, for example, homosexual and still embrace the religion of Islam,
Yes.
or have homosexual tendencies or thoughts,
Yes.
but not act upon them.
Yes.
But isn't that restricting their pragmatic life? For example, they might want to jump into a relationship with another male. Could we, as Muslims,
people out there that want to jump into relationships with their own parents, but society doesn't accept it.
right? So as Muslims, we can't allow society to change our moral compass, our moral standpoints.
Well, I do think it goes back to a greater question, which is who defines and sets for us moral standards. And I do think this is one of the dilemmas of modern liberalist aqidah, which is that I have seen in certain BBC programs, I believe one of them was called The Big Question, you'll get panelists sitting down and be like, well, your religion says do that, but that's against human rights. And then you know that the person's an atheist, and if an intelligent person was having that dialogue with the atheist, they could have asked, well, I accept that some human rights exist, but I don't accept others, and where do you ground your concept of human rights? Who gave humans these intrinsic rights? Because after all, if I am merely a product of blind Darwinian evolution, then what separates me from the rest of the animals? Why should I start judging human beings in a way that I don't judge animals? When, you see, in the world of sharks, it's well known that male sharks forcefully copulate with female sharks. Forcefully, by all standards and meanings of the word. And yet no one will refer to it as rape within the shark world. But why do we do so when it comes to human beings? Because we believe that human beings are elevated above that they have agency, that they have consciousness, that they have intellect. And so I'm completely in agreement that when it comes to human beings, we need to judge them differently from how we judge sharks. But you see, when someone is just a materialist, when someone is someone that believes that we are no different to the other animals, that we are merely products of a blind evolution, who are they to even talk about the concept of a human right? And if we are to talk about the concept of a human right, who are they to limit and define for us what human rights are? And that would be a question I want to have with liberalism, really.
Absolutely. Sounds like it's a very deep and very wide topic. But unfortunately, we don't have time to delve deeper into that. But inshallah, we'll be able to get into that in the next episodes. Thank you so much for your time again.
No problem at all.
And I look forward to our next gathering.
And me too. Jazakumullah.